Fantastic. Okay, so as I say, first section done. Now we're on, if you like, onto part B of this transport section. And I'd like to introduce Dr. Faheem Malik. Faheem is one of the primary authorities in future transport in the UK, having lectured at Northumbria University, the University of Central Lancashire, and is currently lecturer in transportation at the Edinburgh Napier Transport Institute. Faheem is here today to share his thoughts on how our lives can be improved by cities getting smarter when it comes to delivering green transportation and digitally enhanced access. Faheem, thank you.
Oh, thank you so much. So first of all, wonderful session. Before I heard the whole session. I think it lays a perfect foundation for my slides now when I talk about green transportation and when I talk about the social inequality in transportation. Next slide, please. Perfect. Let me start with a bit of background information. Presently in the UK, every year around we have 1,600 fatalities, roughly 130,000 total crashes that involve either somebody being injured or resulting in a road traffic fatality. In terms of vehicle miles, we travel on an average 337 billion vehicle miles every year. And in terms of economic cost, every year around 42 billion pounds are lost just because of the impact of road traffic crashes. In terms of our infrastructure not being fit for the purpose, a classic example is just look at the amount of money that we lose just because of the potholes. It's estimated around 14 to 15 billion pounds are lost annually just because of these potholes. So we established that we are having huge problem in terms of road traffic fatalities. There's an economic cost, but there's also an environmental cost of our transportation. Every year, transportation roughly contributes around 28% of the greenhouse gas emissions that are emitted here. Roughly around 110 to 140 million tons of CO2 equivalent are just produced just because of this transportation. So we have established that there are high road traffic fatalities, there's a huge economic cost, and there's an environmental impact of the transportation, of the present system of transportation. Next slide, please. This lays a perfect foundation in terms of our need for sustainable transportation in order to overcome all these three issues that I mentioned. Now let's look at the sustainable travel indicators. Cycling mode share presently only 0.8% of the distance. Walking is, if we are taking more than one mile, it's not more than 2% of the distances. So in terms of distance that are traveled by these two sustainable mode is quite low. Now, if we try to investigate, one of the critical factors that we have found from our research is the greater risk. Cyclists presently have 20 times, a cyclist is 20 times more likely to be killed or injured for the same mile that's traversed as compared to a car. Now, if we look at the walking also, again, the risk varies from 7.3 times to around 20 times, depending if the journey is less than 1 mile or greater than 1 mile. Next slide, please. Now, after having established the need of sustainable transportation and the indicators that we have in terms of sustainable travel modes, another issue that it's important to be mentioned is the social inequality. Presently, in the UK, richest 10% receive more than three times the subsidy in transportation as compared to the poorest 10%. We just mentioned that in terms of rail travel, even in rail, richest 10% receive over 3.5 times more subsidy than the poor. So we have a problem in transportation. There's a need for sustainable transportation. The indicators for our sustainable travel modes are low. This gets compounded by the social inequality. Next slide, please. Now, this social inequality is not only in terms of richest and the poorest, but even within the regions in the United Kingdom. For example, Wales and northeast of England, where they receive far lower subsidy than regions like London and southeast. A household in London benefits almost four times more from the rail subsidy than in Wales. However, if we take in terms of per journey cost in Wales is proportionally twice as compared to the subsidized travel in London, which basically makes us go back to our classic argument in which we link the amount of travel with the economic output. We link the amount of travel with the access to hospitals, access to education, access to employment. You have to understand that transportation is a driver of inequality, and societies with high level of economic inequality have worse, have worse in terms of economic conditions. They are supposed Data shows that the transport inequality, it is linked with the crime, social mobility, and lower levels of trust. Next slide, please. Now, in terms of trips per person, if we look, car is almost 548 trips per person if we are talking about the per person rates here in the United Kingdom. Let's compare this with the cycle trip or with the bus trip or with the pedestrian trip. They are far, far, far lower. So this makes us conclude that the higher dependence and the higher reliance on car travel has basically led us to this present scenario, in which we are faced with a higher amount of global greenhouse gas emissions from road travel, social inequity, higher economic cost, and a higher number of people that are killed or injured on our roads. Next slide, please. Now, let's look at classic example of Scotland. Scotland has made very bold arguments, very bold commitments in terms of what they want to achieve in terms of sustainable travel. They want to decrease the car travel by 20% by 2030 as compared to our 2020 marks. Now, I talked about all of these indicators. I talked about the risk that each of the travel mode faces presently. And if you compare them with what is the priority at the government level, the car travel is supposed to be at the bottom of a pyramid, whereas the walking and the wheeling, cycling, and public transport are supposed to be much higher. But the annual indicators, the amount of travel that people are using, is entirely contrary to what we are trying to achieve. This is for us the research that we found in terms of contrary to research that we did with different with uh, with different groups in terms of commuters, in terms of transport service providers. One of the critical factors that we have found is that there's a lack of trust in walking and in our sustainable transport mode, say cycling, public transport, walking, and wheeling. Now, this has led to a number of factors and number of scenario analysis we developed here at Transport Research Institute in Edinburgh. What we found is that if we have to do a scenario analysis and we have to encourage people towards a more sustainable transportation modes, we have to do something that's out of the box. Next slide, please. So, what when we say out of the box solutions is you have to completely change in next 10 to 15 years the way we are going with our everyday commute, the way we are going with our everyday travel. This has to change significantly. What we need to explore are our smart mobility options. Smart mobility options, when we are designing our new transport system, they have to be based upon our green transportation system, and all of this can only be achieved if we aim to provide mobility as a service rather than mobility presently primarily based upon car travel. We have to provide it as a service. How things have changed in last, for example, 4 to 5 years, just in terms of our shopping, the same thing can easily be achieved in our transportation. Next slide, please. So, in our present mode, the latest technological advancements, the various government policies, and our commitment towards achieving both at government level and sometimes at regional level also, our commitment towards sustainable transportation linked with the improvement in technology through autonomous travel, we will have an improved transportation system for sure. But if this system does not have active travel in it, the whole system will fail completely. We might be able to achieve some progress, but we won't be able to achieve our targets, be it a 2035 target or 2050 targets. Although there are some discussion on the climate change targets, but what about the targets in terms of social inequity? Everything, the discussion in terms of our access to different healthcare, access to different opportunities. It is essential that active travel is a critical part in our whole debate of new transportation system. Next slide, please. This can only be achieved as, again, I said, when I talked about mobility as a service, it means that you use the latest advancement technology, green transportation, understand people's behavior. It's not only your autonomous travel that will help you achieve or help you to make a better transportation system. It is our understanding of why do people travel, when they travel, what are the reasons that contribute towards a particular mode choice, and that has to be embedded in our transportation system. It cannot be just based upon a few selected individuals or few section of our society that we want to grow and thrive. It has to be based upon every person of our society. Once we understand the diverse needs of each and everybody in our society and integrate that into our transportation system, then only we will be able to achieve a sustainable and a smarter travel. What this will result in, this will result in an urban living form that works for everybody. Smart, green, intelligent cities where individuals thrive. Transportation for us from our work is one of the major barriers that is preventing in achieving social equity in our society. Next slide, please. As I talked about, it's essential to design the transportation system based upon how people will use the system rather than how they should use the system. If you look from down from south up to the north of the country, you will find there are some schemes that sometimes do not make sense. We sometimes provide cycle. There are many examples. Although I'm a strong proponent of cycling infrastructure, there are cycle lanes they are provided at some places which doesn't even make sense. Just because we want people to use cycle lanes, it doesn't mean we don't understand what they want and how we help them, how we provide a guiding hand for them to make smarter choices, to make intelligent choices. Next slide, please. So this is just what I talked about. This just laid the framework. This just laid the foundation for a system that we developed at Northumbria University, and now which we are applying at DRI in Edinburgh. We developed for 4 years an AI-based cycling safety hybrid modeling network for future transportation network. So in this model, what we developed in these models, in this modeling framework is how do you understand the needs of specific persons in the society? How do you understand what are the needs of different individuals in the society? Integrate them into our transportation system and help make a transportation system that works for everybody. Next slide, please. These are some of the examples. If you want to just have a read, most of them are open source, so you can just read few of our papers. This is I'll just briefly talk about a nanoscoping rider safety model for smart and green mobility. Next slide, please. Next slide. Let's just next slide. So what we did is that we took different variables. We took people's age, people's gender, people's occupation, different infrastructure types that they're using, the different meteorological conditions, the different lighting conditions. Instead of designing a transportation system for a macroscopic level, we said, okay, let's develop it at a nanoscopic level for a particular rider, and let's see how different individuals belonging to different backgrounds, age, gender, other variables, how they use the transportation system, and how we can improve their safety so that that helps develop trust in the system as well as it helps them to make smarter choices. We focused primarily first on statistical model, then we developed an artificial intelligence based model, then in the third phase we developed a data learning model. So first statistical analysis. Next slide, please. This is an example of statistical analysis, the classic work that we do in terms of risk rates, how different individuals, how people from different groups, they face different amount of risk. As you can see that people from different age and gender had different risks. The overall risk that female had as compared to male was significantly low. Men were 2.2 times more likely to be involved in a crash for the same mile traversed. Next slide, please. So this was then we said, okay, let's have two different groups of age and gender. And we made some heat maps, we did some statistical analysis, and at 99.9% confidence interval, we came to the conclusion that these two variables are two different variables, and these significantly affect how people use different infrastructure. Next slide, please. Next, this is an example of a predictive model, how we use different variables and we were able to predict different levels of safety for people of different age, gender, for using different environmental conditions, using the same infrastructure under different environmental conditions, using different infrastructure, different types of infrastructure, and also spatial variables in terms of time of day the journey is being made, the day in terms of traffic flow condition. Next slide, please. This is just an explanation of our deep learning model. Next slide, please. Next slide, please. So these are some of the conclusions, and the overall conclusion from this study was that if we have to understand or if we have to achieve sustainability in transportation, a same infrastructure cannot work for everybody. The same system cannot work for everybody. You have to guide people to make smarter choices. For example, in our minimum path algorithm, we select the minimum path between 2 points. But for a cyclist, just a difference of, say, 10 minutes and 12-minute journey doesn't make that much difference. But if that infrastructure is able to provide more safety, it's able to provide better perceived safety, it helps them to make more journey. It encourages them to make more journey. So instead of just developing infrastructure, the whole modeling has to change from minimum path algorithm to a person's needs, their diverse needs, understanding of diverse infrastructure. Next slide, please. Next slide, please. So this is where the present system is, in which if we look around, there are good amount of work that's happening in transportation. So in terms of educationists, in terms of researchers, in terms of practitioners, but presently most of us are working in our own small little bubble. What's required is that there is a collaborative action, there's a bold action, and there's a quantum leap to solve challenges. And all the academicians, policymakers, politicians, the people who run our councils, the practitioners, we all have to come together in order to achieve a better future, a greener future. Thank you.
Fantastic. Faheem, I'm going to have to just step in. I mean, good news is you're back in about 15 minutes as part of the panel session. But I'm really interested in this deeper data